This show is brought to you by Databril, the scalable Amazon PPC management for large Amazon sellers and brands. Visit sellersessions.com/agency for more details. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Again, we bring back Fernando Cruz. How you doing, mate?
Good, man. Thanks for having me again.
You're welcome. Last time we had you and Nick on, which was really good because we've done a bit of a background. Like, you guys are quite successful in the sense that you're now 8-figure sellers, but you had your bumpy roads and stuff like that. And
right.
What I wanted to talk to you about today is the financial angle. But before we address that, do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah. We started selling a little bit over 3 years ago. Since then, we just hit about $25 million sold on Amazon, which is kind of crazy in hindsight. But yeah, I mean, we've, in terms of like financing, we've raised over $1 million actually in debt. So we haven't had to give up any equity, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, we're probably close to 35 employees now, mostly overseas. And then, we've like kind of expanded since then. So now we're selling on Amazon, Walmart, Jet, like a bunch of the different marketplaces, as well as now we're building out like retail and like a few other initiatives that we've got going on.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's pick this apart. Like you just said, you've raised just over $1 million in debt. Do you want to break that out? Because obviously Amazon sellers are very smart. They understand things, but there's so many different ways of bringing in money into the business. You know, you're talking about raising debt, therefore not giving up any equity. Do you want to break down all the benefits of doing so and how much you and Nick still retain control of the business, etc.?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess when you're thinking about like capital raises, right, there's generally like just two kind of buckets. And then there's like obviously a lot of like nuances to each. But, you can raise money through debt, which is basically just getting like, a loan to the business. And then like the other side is taking on equity. So you're basically putting on like a value to the specific company. And then you're saying like, okay, well, I want to raise $1 million. The company is worth $10 million. So like I'm giving up basically 10%, just like for like simple like numbers. But as it applies to debt, like especially for like a consumer products business, there's a ton of benefits, just because like in the beginning, that you're like the smallest and you need the cash like the most. So you have the least like options. But if you're able to take on debt to help yourself like grow, then if you, let's say, wanted to take on equity a year later, then you're going to have that like, growing EBITDA, which is going to give you like a better valuation. And then so you're giving up like less equity by taking on debt earlier on, so that it allows you to like kind of grow the business and then get like a better value at like a later point if you decide to like to take on equity investors or eventually sell, stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. And so talk me through the debt process. You just said you've raised up to $1 million in debt. Where did you start with that, and where did you go to raise this kind of money? And like obviously you got to $1 million eventually. Was that done in stages or?
Definitely done in the stages. Yeah, I mean, I think now we've raised probably a total of 1.3 maybe, and we paid back a lot of it. But yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so in the beginning, so no bank will touch you. And even then it still takes a long time to get like the relationship built with a bank to actually loan you money. And I can go into that like a little bit more why. But I mean, so in the beginning, I mean, we had like a little bit of funds ourselves. And then we started reaching out to like, I mean, honestly, like the people that would talk to us. So family, friends, we were able to raise, I think it was 2 notes each for $30K in the beginning. And that was like really helpful. Like, cause we put in maybe around $30K. And then, so that basically like, tripled like what available funds we had for our inventory. But then we hit a home run product and like literally we could not keep it in stock without taking on more debt. So we went, to like, a friend that's like, basically like a high net worth. And we're like, hey man, like here's our financials. Like we're doing super, super well, but like we cannot keep this like in stock. And fortunately he came from like a background in consumer products. He like understood like the challenges of like keeping things in stock. So yeah, he loaned us the money like at amazing terms. He's a really good friend. And so, yeah, I mean, that's basically what we did for the first maybe a year and a half, is like just going to like former bosses or people that had worked with us in the past. They trusted us. And then we gave them like really, really like the best terms that like we thought we could afford. Because we just knew that we needed the money, and that like giving up equity in like the long term would be way, way more expensive. So we were giving out like, it was like a promissory note, or interest only, which means that you don't pay principal, you only pay like the interest, and we were paying 12%. So where a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, that's so high! My bank loan is 6%, or my student loan is 8%," which is totally true. But the risk is a lot higher for like a startup. And so yeah, we paid 12% interest only with the 2-year notes, with an option to extend for a third year. And I mean, that put us on the map. I mean, that gave us like the cash flow that we needed to grow to about like 7 million. And then afterwards, we took on like different like structuring, so like SBA loans, things like that, which like I think are only in the US, but are very, very favorable towards the entrepreneur, because they're over 10-year notes, or 10-year loans, compared to like Amazon's one year, which is kind of brutal. But yeah, I mean, that's like kind of what we did like in the beginning.
Sounds good. Do you want to break out for those who are not kind of aware of notes and stuff? Do you want to break out exactly what is a note and what that differentiates to other financial tools?
Yeah, so like a note is just like, it's kind of like a simple agreement for like a loan. And then, so you can do, you can kind of write it any way that you want. And so like for us, like ours specifically, it was like a 2-year balloon payment. So that means that like none of the principal we had to pay. So like if we, let's say, paid, or let's say for us, like if we got like $100K note, which was actually what happened. So that means we would pay 12% of it, so 12 grand over a year. So it comes out to $1,000 in interest payments every single month. And then at the end of the 2 years, then we have to pay back the 100K. But like, like an Amazon seller can do so much, with 100 grand, and then you have 2 years to basically build up enough cash flow to pay it back. So yeah, and then we also had the option to pay another 2% upfront to extend for a third year. So like that also is like really, really helpful if you need that third year. And we elected to do that sometimes. But yeah, I mean, that's like basically a note is just like some kind of like agreed upon like amount. I'm going to borrow this, I'm going to pay it back with this interest over like this period of time. And then so it could be like a principal and interest payment, or it could also just be like an interest only payment. And yeah, I mean, it just depends on like, your relationship with the investor. It depends on like, your cash flow in the business. Like interest only for us was the best, especially because we're, our cost of capital is the 12%, right? And then, so I'm thinking about it like, okay, well, like the average ROI on my product is, let's say, for sure over 100%. So and then if I can flip inventory like this many times with 100% ROI, like as long as I'm managing like, and of course you're gonna have losses in there too, but like if you're managing your inventory and your product selection right, then the 12% is actually really cheap. And so that's how like I kind of looked at it as I was like raising a lot of money, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. So then would you like to explain the difference there is that you mentioned earlier on in the show is that it costs you more in equity later if you gave away equity up front. Do you want to explain that strategy? So obviously you raised debt so that you had more value later in your company. Do you want to break that down for us?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So what's the best way to, okay. So if, so let's say, so yeah, I'm paying 12% for the cost of capital. So let's just use that like 100K note. So over the 2 years, if each year I'm paying $12,000 in interest, then over the 2 years, I'm paying $24,000 for having that specific loan. But at that time we were growing so fast, like we were growing like 300% a year. So, if the company was worth like, let's say 200,000 in the beginning. And then if we 3x'd that first year, now we're 600,000, right? And then, let's say maybe we grow another, like, 75%, whatever. So now we're worth, like, what is that? Like 800, a little over 800,000. But let's say I to get that 100,000 at the time, because I was so much smaller and only worth like 200,000, then maybe I had to give up 10% of the company. So it was worth 20,000 of the original of the original 200,000.
Yep.
But now I'm giving 10% of the 800,000. And then so even by the end of the note, like if you're paying 80,000 or what would have been the note, your value in equity is now 80,000. But let's say we build it for another 5 years. So that could end up being millions of dollars. Like if you sell for 10 million, 10% equity, like, yeah, that's $1 million instead of what was a very confined, like, interest percentage. So yeah, I mean, it really just depends on like your goals. And like, I mean, yeah, you're like, honestly, your like ability to raise debt and like make people feel comfortable about it, because it is like a very risky investment. Because I mean, and this is what you hear from the banks all the time is like, look, if you can't sell this inventory, what am I going to do? Like there's like, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, I have like inventory and that's my collateral. But like, I mean, from the bank's perspective, which is totally spot on, is that like, yeah, if you got $1 million in inventory and, your Amazon account's get shut down or you can't sell it, then like for sure this banker that's never sold on Amazon can't sell it. And so you have to like, really make them feel comfortable. Sometimes we would use like a personal guarantee, which like meant like, no matter what, even if the bank or if the business defaults, like we're responsible for this like personally. And so that's like really scary. But like if you're that confident in your business and your ability to choose products and all that kind of stuff, like it can be worth it.
Yeah. And so how would someone go about that? So what you said is basically, it's about relationships. I'm 42 now, so I've been in business for a number of years. I've built good relationships. Like me getting money, access to money is not very difficult because I've got to that stage to build those relationships, to be put in those positions. As long as I come along with the right financials and stuff, I can pretty much raise what I need. I choose not to on a personal level. I like to grow with my own cash or with my business. Right. But if someone wants to do this, what is the best way? Is that they literally going to approach people with a decent net worth that they've got relationships with and show them the business and start it from that way? Or introductions? How would they go about it? And what kind of level of cash should they ask for at the very beginning? Because I mean, we've joked about this before. In the UK, like in the startup scene where they've got nothing, it's just vaporware. Everyone wants to raise 250K off the back of a business plan, but they've got nothing. They've got no users, nothing else in between. Where is a good place to start for someone who's selling on Amazon, who needs to get help with financing because inventory becomes the problem for them? Mm-hmm. Where would you say is the best way to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think introductions. I mean, out of the people that invested in us, like we had a relationship with everybody. I think that's definitely. I think it's hard to go and email somebody cold. I mean, I definitely got a lot of introductions, like while we were running the company. And some we probably could have worked out deals at like maybe 14 or 15%, but pretty much everyone that was at 12% we knew before starting the company. Yeah. So I would say like it just really depends like if you're willing to go up to that like 15% give or take. But yeah, I would say introductions. There's like kind of investor groups like angel investors that you can go like present to them. And then, yeah, I mean, it's honestly just like, it's a lot of networking. Like, I mean, I spent like so much time talking to banks, and then like the banks would refer me to like, hey, you should talk to this guy. Like, oh, you don't have enough, like 2 years of tax returns, so maybe you can talk to this venture debt firm. And then it was just like constantly like refining my pitch, like getting really good at explaining like our cash flow model, getting really good at explaining our business model, like putting together like decks. I mean, it was pretty much like a full-time job for me. Like I definitely stepped away from like managing like the Amazon stuff for a while, as I was like kind of thinking about like, okay, like how do I like raise this much money? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, having like a business partner like Nick is really, really helpful so that he could like manage the day to day of Amazon. And then like, yeah, I was like out like raising money. But yeah.
That makes sense. So where you are in the cycle now, you've raised money. You said you paid a big chunk of that back. What kind of, do you think you'll take more money now, or are you definitely at a position where cash flow is taken care of? You've expanded quite heavily in the last 3 years, haven't you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. It's tough. Like I always love growing. I think that's like, the most exciting part for me. It's like running a business. But yeah, we've taken on a lot. We've actually paid like a good portion of it back, thankfully. But yeah, so I think our major goal this year is to hit a $2 million EBITDA. Yeah. And then once we do that, then I think we're going to kind of reevaluate and see, because once you're like above that, like $1 or $2 million EBITDA, like you're in a much, much better financial position to take on like a bigger line. So we could take on like a $2 or $3 million like line. Yeah. And it's less risky. Like, we're like more stable as a company. We've got, 35 employees, like we've got systems, like technology, like there's just a lot more to invest in versus just like, I've got one product, it's killing it. You know what I mean? And like I've been selling for 6 months. Yeah. So I think we're going to reevaluate like kind of in the beginning of next year, see like what our options are in terms of like those types of lines. But I think like, I mean, I definitely want to continue scaling and like, kind of what we were talking about earlier is like, there's ways you can structure your manufacturing relationships and stuff to kind of help you with like cash flow. But just like a nature of working with China, a lot of the time, like you're not going to get like great terms. And, so I would love for us to like, take like a slightly bigger note and then see like what we can do with that for the next like year or two.
Sounds great. Right, let's wrap that there. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that's it. I mean, there's one other option I guess you can look at that's like pretty, that if you guys are interested, like it's pretty popular, in the startup world, and like people have asked us to do it. We decided not to because we didn't want to give up the equity, but there's something called a SAFE, like our convertible note, which is like really helpful. But it basically gives you like debt, like, it's basically like a debt offering in the beginning, but it's like with a promise, and sometimes there's the constituents to get equity in like a later round. Yeah. So if you're going really big, like that might make sense. But it's also like, it's really founder friendly, because like it's pretty standard template. So you don't have to spend a lot on legal fees. And then there's just a lot of advantages of not having, like, let's say you're raising from 5 different people. You don't need to get them all to agree on a valuation. You're just doing like a specific debt, and it just makes it a lot like a simpler process so that you can focus on building your company.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. How's the best way people can reach you? Do you want to let them know about what you're up to in terms of other ventures you've got going?
Yeah. I'm more than happy if you guys have questions on it. Like, I'm happy to try to help. You can email me at fernando@sellertradecraft.com. And, I mean, we just launched a course, and then we're helping kind of new and like even some experienced sellers, get to that kind of 6 or 7 figure mark. So everything from product selection, inventory planning, sourcing, launching, Facebook ads, you name it.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Other than that, we'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.